Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Sisto Says, powered by Design 2147, a New York City building and code consulting firm. Today I have Walter LeCompte from Lou Environmental Services. Walter, welcome aboard.
Thank you, Sisto. It's great to be here.
And it's great to have you. We chatted a little bit offline, but as always, when we start the show, we always talk about the power of people. Mm-hmm. Another gentleman who was on the show, Bill Widener, met him at a BizDevel event, and we started chatting about the podcast and about finding subject matter experts. And lo and behold, Bill said, you need to call Walter. So...
Yeah, actually, Bill was very excited to share Sisto Says with me, and provided the opportunity to be here was very exciting for us. Our companies, Lou Environmental and Keep My Gas, are working very closely together in servicing New York City properties.
Right, and I think that the connection there is that there's a lot of local laws that happen in New York City. Mm-hmm. We write about them. We inform people through our newsletter about them, but that's not really what we do, right? Because a lot of it is, I guess the word I would use is that you're responsible for your own, the building manager may be responsible for their own way of maintaining records and doing things. Not everything gets filed with the building department. Perfect example is local law related to the parapets, right? Mm-hmm. You have an engineer or someone do the report, but you don't file it with the city. You got to maintain those records, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about record keeping and history and things like that. As these laws sometimes doesn't mean fill out a form and file it. It means you have to do this and you have to keep your records in case someone comes to you. So really today, I am not a subject matter expert, and I'm the first one to say it, so that's why Walter is here, is that our conversation revolved around Local Law 31.
Correct.
And Local Law 31 has a deadline coming up in August 9th, I believe, of 2025.
That is correct.
And I would like for you to explain a little bit about what this local law is, who it applies to, and there is proactiveness of this law that I just learned over these several conversations you and I have had offline. And then there's the part of just doing the right thing. And I think that's what's really cool about some of the local laws. I mean, even on the episode that I shot with Bill, we talked about, well, this is the law, but wouldn't you really want to know if you have a gas leak? And the answer is yes. So I think we're going to find some similarities between the two shows, but I think yours is more specific to different parts of New York City, not just the building department. It's more related to the health department and other agencies. So tell us a little bit about what, in your words, what Local Law 31 is.
Again, Sisto, thank you so much. Local Law 31 is really driven by New York City's Housing Preservation and Development, HPD, and they have amended, there was an amendment to Local Law 1 of 2004, which that law required an awareness of lead-based paint in a property, right? Local Law 31 really focuses on the testing and the level of lead in the property. So the threshold was set when it was first introduced at a 1.0 cm per MC squared.
Yes, and I became familiar with that recently on working on my own house. So yes, I know that part.
And so that threshold was set and has subsequently been dialed down to half that level, which is a bit of a challenge. But Local Law 31 really focuses on requiring property owners of residential rental units to have tests done to understand the situation of that apartment so that the property owner can take appropriate action based upon the age of the property, the tenant, if a child lives there, and so on.
So I caught a couple of keywords that I'd like the viewers and subscribers to understand, because when we were offline and we were talking about it, certain words certain keywords caught my attention, and one of them is rental properties, right? So, and in New York City, that gets very complicated. And one of the places that we talk about is, the difference between a company owning a building with 30 units and they rent them all, a co-op building where basically there's an individual who actually lives in their own unit, right? And then there's a condo, which is a whole nother set of rules with shares and participants and all of that. So when we talk about these local laws, it seems like, oh, it's so straightforward. It's just, every rental property. And then you start to get into the specifics. But what I understand is, obviously, if you use the word HPD, it really means residents, right? I mean, we're really concerned about people living in these apartments that have the potential to lead exposure.
Correct.
And then the second part of it is the city, the health department, they want to have a way for, if you rent these apartments, to quantify if there's potential exposure, not just on August 9th, but then creating a plan of action as we go forward. So in my world, my staff laughs at me all the time. They say, we have a problem. And I go, okay, so before we start solving the problem, let's quantify the problem, right? So I think that this law is a perfect example of that, which is, okay, we know that if your building was built in this time period, which we're going to talk a little bit about, and we know that, or it was renovated in this time period, there's the potential that you got lead in your building. And you, through our local law, meaning the owner, you should quantify what you have. I mean, in a layperson's terms, is that kind of what we're talking about?
It is. And again, the original laws were written with the assumption of lead-based paint based on the age of a building. So prior to 1960, there was an assumption that there was lead-based paint there.
Agreed.
Not until the laws were amended did the testing say, please quantify this so that we understand that it's there or not. And if we define that there's not lead in a rental property, exemptions can be granted to avoid, so that the property owner no longer has to follow the annual guidelines for inspection and checking and so on, because it has been quantified as lead free. Yeah.
So here we are. We're coming up in the summer of 2025, and Blue Environmental Services running around New York City with a whole bunch of people testing buildings, and the majority of the group that you're testing are going to be probably rental properties that are owned by an entity. You're probably going to be doing quite a few co-ops, regardless if they don't have to do it, but it's good practice to do it, right? And so now here we are. We do this testing, and your company goes in and they go through this building. Tell us a little bit about the reporting. Is there a physical piece that goes to HPD? Is there a physical piece that goes to the health department? Is it just for your own records so that when you renovate later on, that there's a practice? So, because that's always confusing to me. And I started the show by saying that, which is, we get a lot of calls where people say, oh, I just had Lou Environmental Services do this, but what do I do with this? Right? So tell us a little bit about that.
So the laws do cause some confusion because there's a lot of nuance to them based upon the environment in which the laws are being applied. But to your point, again, rental properties are required. There are exemptions without requiring a lead-free exemption. There are exemptions to even needing testing. So if you're an owner-occupied property, you're not required to test. If you'd like to, we strongly encourage it.
Right, because it doesn't mean just because you live there and there's nobody else there that there's no lead in your building, right? You could have a problem. You have your grandkids come over, or you have your own kids. You may not know that it's there. And we know that in Connecticut because when they do a blood test, if there's a high level, they notify the health department. The health department then sends an inspector to the house, and they have to do testing because there's something there, whatever it could have been, but you don't know where it's coming from, so they want to know.
Yeah, and New York City operates the same way in those regards. So after child testing can initiate an investigation, and then further inspection is done. And that's why maintaining your property, the records of your tests and reports are so critical. So
tell me a little bit about that. You go out, you do a test on a building, right? You have these results. how do you make it user friendly for the owner of the building for the historical records and the testing? Do you have portals? Like
Certainly, yeah. And so the property owners are required to maintain records for 10 years, so HPD can come and investigate if they feel a need to. And as a supplement to that, we offer a web portal for our customers.
Oh, you do?
So that we're able to track and manage and monitor each of the individual properties, each unit within a building, and maintain status of that, so that the property owners, building managers, property managers are aware of what needs to be done or what has been done, and of course we have digital copies of all the records that we produce as well.
So they're scanned. Everything's in one place.
Absolutely.
They're not fumbling through a folder. If HPD calls them to the mat, they have it. They go to the portal. They put in their address, and lo and behold, there's scanned copies. There's test results, and so now we figure out that in this building, this podcast is powered by Design 2147, a New York City-based code, zoning, and entitlement company, and we're back to the show. That you tested, we exceed the levels that the city and the state, I guess, say, or the federal government says you're above those. So now does your company offer the services of helping them identify remediation, like put plans in effect, or more importantly, hey, if you're going to go into apartment 5B because the people moved out and you're going to paint it, you know that there's potential there, and you must dust control. You must do these certain steps.
So it's a well-framed question. There's a lot of nuance to the answers, though, and let me kind of start and kind of
well, that's why I asked it.
Work backwards. So first, levels of lead paint. HPD has set a standard of 0.5, so half of what it was when the law was originally written regarding the XRF testing. But with that, the quality of the paint that's currently on the wall matters. The age of the tenant matters as well. Let me edify. You can have paint that is intact, which means that
it's not flaking.
It's not flaking. It's intact, and so any lead behind there is
encapsulated.
Well, not encapsulated, but safely sealed behind the paint.
Oh, okay, safely sealed. That's a good word.
And so there is no lead-based paint hazard present because the paint is intact. Gotcha. That's kind of the terminology that we defer to. The alternative would be the paint is deteriorated, and with lead-based paint on the substrate and current deteriorated paints on the surface, you have a potential lead-based paint hazard. And so hazards by themselves are not actionable unless there's a child under the age of 6 residing in the property.
And that's what I learned in Connecticut.
Right. And residing can be as little as 10 hours a week.
Right.
So
Stopping
a grandchild
over,
visiting.
right.
Yes, exactly. Visiting a grandparent. And so, again, the situation of the tenant, the situation of the property, the age of the property are all determining factors in the appropriate course of action that can be followed.
That's a lot. That's a lot to manage for a management company that has an older building that has several hundred apartments.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot of data.
It is.
To see where, once you quantify it and where it is and the stage that it's at and the people that are living there and how old they are and who visits them, it gets a lot of moving parts.
Additionally, too, the desires of the property owner and what they want to do with the property matter as well. So having no lead in your property doesn't, although it can qualify you for a lead-free exemption, unless you apply for one, it's not granted automatically.
And now, when you apply for that, is that through HPD or the health department or both?
It is through HPD. They actually have what they call the lead exemption online portal. It stands for LEOP. This is on their website, and it's used to help streamline the exemption application process.
Right. So if you went into a building and your firm deemed that the building was lead-free, and you get this document, there's a way for you to take these documents, apply for the exemption, and then get qualified as a lead-free building.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. So they have thought of the long term that as buildings get, I don't want to use the wrong word, but remediated or quantified as being lead-free, there's a placeholder for you to put it in and then get the verification that you've met the requirements based on HPD's laws, so that when you go back or a new person moves into an apartment or whatever, they can say, oh, well, you know what, I have a young child. This is a great building because this is a lead-free building.
Exactly.
This works for me.
Exactly. Now, getting an exemption is not required.
No.
And actually, even having a lead hazard, which means deteriorated paint,
Right.
with a lead-based
I know
substrate,
you're going to go there.
that you're allowed to have your tenants live there in certain situations as well, and that's allowable.
Right.
So there is a spectrum of solutions and outcomes based upon the intent of the owner, the profile of the tenant, and the property itself.
A lot of moving parts. So here we are. August 9th's going to come. If these building owners don't comply, are they assessed a penalty?
They can be. It's not currently actionable. So HPD has not expressed that they are going to be actively pursuing property owners. They're not currently investigating property owners now who are not compliant at this point. The situation really relies upon if a case is opened
Right.
against the
Just gonna
property,
see.
an investigation is
If something is
undertaken.
already going on.
Exactly. And their records are not concurrent with the laws, there could be fines applied to that property owner because of that.
Right, because there's a pre-existing situation.
HPD does do random
Yeah, well, they have
investigation as well.
HPIT.
Yes.
You know, we see HPD violations all the time, and a lot of the violations, which they come through our office. We don't handle them, but we help our clients to guide them. And some are for no heat, but a lot of times we'll see in some of them flaking paint, and so once you see that sends it to another place, which then sends it to another place, and then all of a sudden you start to paint this, that, no pun intended, but you start to create, a vision of, well, they had flaky paint, now they have this problem, now they have that problem, so here we are. So
You can end up with a cascade of violation problems, and our recommendation to to all of our customers is that by staying in front of that,
Exactly.
by staying
Being
aware,
proactive,
being
right.
proactive, you can help limit your liability of violations.
right, and I think that the city is pretty smart about it, which most people would think is opposite, but I don't. So I'd like to give you my perspective on it, is if you have a local law and it's new, get as many people to buy in without penalizing them than saying, oh, if you don't do it, we'll fine you. And then sometimes I think that works backwards. To be honest with you, Walt, I've been around in this city for 40 years. People will say, so what's the fine, $100? Why would I test? Who cares? They're not going to bother me. I'll just pay the $100. I'm off the hook. And I'm not sure that's the right approach. So to me, getting it out there and making it informative to people, making the entities that own these buildings comfortable in doing the testing, and making them feel that they're proactive is really part of creating really good local laws.
That's well said. I mean, our mission is really to simplify the entire process for our customers. It can be daunting, and again, we've applied
scary.
and we've applied tools to help make it as simple as possible and make it as digestible as possible for the customers to embrace the law and comply.
Yeah, and I think also, we've seen, through the history of local laws, right? From, facade local law violations and, parapets now, gas testing, which we talked about with Bill on previous episodes. And we can go down the list, retaining walls. There's so many local laws, right? And what we find is where it starts, there's a journey. So if you started, the gas piping back in 2016 and we started it in 2020, from 2020, Bill gave us a journey.
Certainly.
Fittings got changed. And the same thing is probably going to happen in the world of the testing that you do, that from 2004 to where we are today, fast forward 21 years, a lot has happened, and that testing process, that procedure, that quantification, it keeps changing. So I think the city does a good job of, hey, let's get the information. Let's see who's going to put it in, let's quantify it, let's analyze it, and then we can adjust the local law to make it friendly, and people will comply, and we're going to get better data. And I think that's not easy to do, but they've done a pretty good job over the years, even though people get upset at it.
Yeah, I mean, it is to serve a good purpose, right? And again, avoiding child sicknesses through lead poisoning is
And I think
very
that's
important.
the intent of the
That
law,
is the
correct?
intent.
I mean, we didn't even talk about that at the beginning of the show, but it's really for children is the biggest concern. It doesn't mean it doesn't affect other people, but
Correct.
but children is the biggest concern.
Correct. Yeah, and again, New York City, to its credit, has been very innovative in the fact that they led the nation by 18 years in outlawing lead-based paint. So,
Wow.
really progressive in that stance, and have been very stringent with their rules solely for the purpose of improving the health and maintaining the health of the residents here of the city.
That which kudos to them. I mean,
Absolutely.
that's always like super important. So tell us a little bit about remediation. I know that your side of the business is the testing, right? And in certain instances, you can't do both, right?
Correct.
In asbestos, if you do the testing, you can't do the remediation. I believe mold is the same. If you find the mold, you can't remediate it. You can oversee portions of the remediation, like monitoring and things like that. So tell me a little bit. They come in, they find some lead on a radiator cover. Tell us a little bit about that process.
Sure.
Obviously, you did the testing, but tell us a little bit about the remediation process.
So we do have a remediation division within our company, and we do remediation services through them. We try not to overlap our remediation services with our testing services in the same environment, just to maintain some objectivity. And that's not required, but it's something that a practice we
Right,
like
because
to
if you
follow.
did the testing, you say,
Yeah, and
we'll pass on the remediation.
and post remediation services, there is what's considered a clearance testing procedure
Right.
to verify the work was done properly and that the results were achieved that were set out to be.
Right. So this is what
Absolutely.
we found. This is what we remediate, and this is the conclusion that we did it within the
Correct.
letter of the law, and we're below the.
And to be clear, remediation is somewhat of a generic term, describing it like addressing something. So, if, for example, we were having a baseboard in the home that had a lead-based paint, and the property owner chose to remove that, right? That could be done with an RRP, someone who's been trained to handle a lead environment.
Right.
But if you had a violation that you're responding to for a similar situation, you need an abatement company, somebody who's certified by the EPA to handle abatement.
Because it was a violation.
Because it was a violation. And there are abatement procedures you can follow if you're looking to get a lead safe certificate. If you're not able to achieve lead free, that is also required to be conducted by an abatement firm. EPA
So, and
certified.
they would come in and do whatever the process is to make it.
Encapsulation.
Right.
Yes, and things. That's one of the options.
Okay. So,
Removal, yeah.
so my first question is, how busy are you for this local law 31? I'm just curious to understand, trying to quantify in my mind, are the building owners taking the law seriously?
Yeah, it's been our experience they are, and business is absolutely ramping for us in the city here. The local law 31 has been in place since 2020, so we're coming up on the end of the 5-year cycle, right? And it's not cyclical by the law, but it was by the deadline that was set.
Correct.
And
So that's a great question, not to interrupt you, but so after this portion of local law 31 comes out that you need to report by August 9, 2025, is there like another 4 years or 5 years, or it's just a one-time reporting right now?
yeah, and let me clarify, it's not reporting, it's just testing.
Testing, right?
Testing and maintaining records. And so no, once you've tested, you're good. And so you could have even, again, tested before the threshold was lowered, and those prior tests are valid.
Because you did it.
That you did it. Now what you have left over, I mean, the result of that is that you probably have a lead environment because the thresholds were higher.
Right.
So under current standard terms, you're in a lead environment.
So you have to retest.
Well, you have to retest, but you have to respond appropriately. So when you go do any kind of work on the property, it has to be handled by an RRP or somebody who's trained in handling a lead environment, because you now know you have a lead environment.
Right. So we talked a little bit about that, which is it's much different than asbestos, where you someone goes out, finds it, and says, "Oh, you can't start work. You have to go through DEP. You have to fill out these forms. You have to be, an abatement contractor. You have to be certified. You have to handle it a certain way." And then once it's done, they do the air monitoring. They make sure the place is clean, and then they issue you a final report, and then you're able to go to work, unless you get special exemptions to work over here and not work over there. Well, I don't want to get into all. But with lead, it's a little bit different. If you know it's there, it's kind of in the means and methods of construction, unless you have a violation, unless you have a certain situation. But every apartment that a contractor goes in is supposed to know about lead, and they're supposed to. It's not, you have an ACP5, you're off the hook. You don't have to worry about asbestos. Lead is not like that. So tell us a little bit that, you go in an apartment and you're the contractor. You're supposed to be privy to the laws for the New York Health Department.
You should be. And the health department, against
HPD, Health Department.
Yep, was operating under for a very long time that there was a presumption of lead. And that was just the working standard. And so not until the XRF testing was put into place did they actually set thresholds for the testing that was being placed to say...
So first it was automatic 100%. And then they said, well, if you do testing and you're in these levels, then
you're above or below.
You're
correct?
above or below.
Right, and respond accordingly. But and so HPD as becoming... The local laws have been issued through New York City for the city to become more aware and actually make the property owners more aware and be able to respond to any challenges or investigations that are presented to the property owners.
And one of the things that we talked about earlier in the show is, if you have it, wouldn't you want to know it, right? So that as you renovate, as people move in, as people are looking, your insurance company, you're reducing your liability by being aware of these things and having a plan in place versus not knowing and then having the potential for kids to get sick or for other things to happen within your building that you could have prevented.
That's an excellent point. I mean, the cost of an inspection is relatively minor compared to the liability that you could be exposed to by not knowing,
Right.
And the fines you can encounter for not following the laws.
Right, because we talked about the fines for reporting, but then there's HPD, there's health department. I mean, if you really are not doing a good job, this can compound into a serious problem.
It could, and again, we encourage our customers to be as proactive as possible to avoid those situations.
So, as we do on all our shows, as we kind of get to the last phase of the show, good friend Andrew Peters, Curry and Brown, he should be paying me for all these plugs that I give him. We talk about forecasting, and his line always is, he's a cost estimator. He's got to use past history to come up with some data, and then he's got to tell someone without a set of plans what it's going to cost to build a new building without anything, and he can. From this history, he gets to understand and project it's going to cost you $1,500 a square foot. So I always ask the question at the end, we need to look forward, not back, is where do you see, after August 9th, being in this service of testing lead, where do you see in a year from now the city and the health department, once they get all this data that they eventually will get, that they've been accumulating for 4 or 5 years. Do you think there's going to be some major changes?
I wouldn't project major changes, but there has been a continual trend to increase awareness of a potential hazard, to monitor it, to report on it, to be able to track on it. And not say report, but be able to respond to
quantify
any query that comes in.
Query.
And so providing the property owner greater understanding at a more detailed level has been what's been driving the requirements of New York City's HPD.
Right. So I think that when you get, if all of this information goes somewhere, right, whether they maintain it somewhere, it just gives more power to the people making the decisions to understand what to do with lead as we move into the next piece.
Yeah, I mean, we're living with lead. It's all around, and
Right.
and managing the situation is the goal of all these laws. And I do believe that so that the next phase of this is a management process. And so we believe at Lou Environmental maintaining thorough records and having easily accessible records to be able to respond to, again, an inquiry would alleviate any potential liability that a potential owner could
Right,
encounter.
versus a super in a building going through his file looking for it, right? And you know, we laugh about that, but today's technology, you know, we have this whole office here that we used to have rows and rows of plans and files, and now we have nothing. We have empty cabinets, empty desks, no plans.
I'm sure a very large database.
Yes, up in the cloud somewhere that we don't know where it is. So, Walter, thank you so much. I have learned a lot today. I learned a lot just speaking to you last week. I appreciate you taking the time to come in. So, any property managers, August 9th is around the corner. If you need to get a hold of Walter, you can reach out to me. You can reach out to Walter directly at LouEnvironmentalServices.com, I would assume. somewhere.
LouEnvironmental.com.
Yeah, LouEnvironmental.com.
You abbreviated that a little bit,
Yeah, we'll take the services out. But if you have any questions, you could reach out to me. We can get you to Walter. But any way that we could help any of the building owners out there. You know, children are can get seriously ill from lead, and we definitely don't want that to happen.
Sisto, I want to thank you so much. This has been a pleasure, and I think hopefully very informative for your
I know it is.
your audience.